So we're nearly there. Yep, we have the closing panel. So if Amos, James, Lewis, Evan, Ben, Mark's making his way, and Dean, if you can come on down, we're going to have the closing panel. So I hope you found the results from the work streams interesting. I think that it's both therapeutic after having some excellent presentations in the morning, and a very impressive demonstration from Truphone and its partners, to have that chance to just discuss, share ideas and perspectives. Oh, there you go. Yeah. The reason I made a comment about, as dressed as you're comfortable, but make sure you're dressed, was for James. So we're wrapping things up now. So this is the closing panel. This is really looking at the future of telecom application development. Now, we ran a pre-conference survey, and we had some excellent questions that came out of that. So I've got a whole list of questions. We're going to open it up to the audience as well. I'm going to kick off with one. Panelists, you can ask each other questions. You can abuse each other, basically, on your answers. I mean, this is just fun. It's informal. It's wrapping up what has been an intense, basically, couple of days. But I think the thing for me is it's been very open and frank. So definitely on this closing panel, let's maintain that. So let's kick off with, what's your view about telecom app development and the market by 2020? Will it exist? Will it be subsumed within basically Apple and Google stores? Jump in and comment. Oh, sorry. Whoever's going to comment, let me give you...
Who wants to go first?
There's another one there as well. So just share the...
Dean is never.
You need to turn it on.
Well, shall I dive in whilst Dean's struggling with the microphone? Clearly, telecoms application development is going to be around for some time to come. It's going to get bigger. It's going to be absolutely massive. And those people who leap in with both feet and grasp it with both hands are going to do all right.
Leap in with both feet and grasp with both hands.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah.
What can I say? British public school education.
I'd say yes and no. I think there's certainly a lot of stuff that's going on in places, particularly in markets which have got lots of feature phones, where not everyone has a smartphone, and it's questionable when they will get them. What I'm slightly worried about, some of the things I've heard about, is lots of technical architecture about platforms, and not enough about realistic examples. I haven't heard the word design mentioned enough as well, and actually how does this stuff work in the hands of the end user. So there's something about, you could force something to voicemail by doing 600, dialing 600 or 660 of the user's number. I was like thinking, well, on a phone that means I have to know the number and then dial 660, but I have to go to the contact list and cut and paste the number, and then do I put the leading zero on? It's horrible. But we need to think about user experience.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about that a little bit, because that's a really good point. Because again, we're the choir. We do Lego blocks, and we're really creating this thing. I think ultimately, if what we do in the next sort of 5 years is successful, the sorts of services that use the things we call telecom APIs don't look like APIs anymore. Exactly. One of the speakers during the event spoke about the personalization of services, and the idea that you can have a particular service from a carrier that just does what you want it to do. And whether that's with your voicemail, your OVR, whether that's syncing with this service or this service, whether that's pointing your inbound SMS to iMessage or to Hangouts or to whatever, those sorts of things are going to have to be consumer-driven services. They can just happen, point and click on your smartphone, or point and click on your website. But creating that user experience that doesn't look like a developer experience is potentially going to be something that this whole entire room needs to get better at.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to your question, will they exist in 5 years? Clearly, we're going to be communicating in 5 years. I mean, the need to communicate in real time, voice, text, it's not going away. Yeah. I think what we think of as a telecom application developer, and what we think of them like today, will not be what we think of them in 5 years. I mean, their technology is moving so quickly, especially with the web and so many accessible services, that they will look more like developers than telecom developers.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point.
one of the things we've done in Asiato is there's a KPI for hiring non-telco people. Right? That's actually a KPI, and it started at GCO level, so it's really good news. The second thing is that we're trying to put interpreters into the organizations that can actually interpret something that may be offered by externals and say, actually, this is good, actually, this can work, actually, this works, and or filter it. And the third thing we're doing, which is what my project is about, is to just get people to understand the art of the possible. Yeah. In other words, the API shouldn't even be a conversation in 5 years' time. There won't be a conversation. It'll just be a natural way of doing things. It already is in many companies. And the examples we use are always organizations like Amazon, because actually Amazon, their USP is almost identical to ours, right? It's customer, it's payment, it's logistics, or fulfillment. It's identical. So we should be trying to emulate exactly the way they operate. And that's what we're trying to do.
No, that's a very good point.
I agree. It will be there, and it will be there differently. What I see from last year to this year is that there are more and more platforms. So we can see already that the product offering is like increasing. So last year there were maybe 2 or 3 platforms here, now 6, maybe 20 next year. So the trend is clearly to expansion. I don't know where it will be in 5 years, but what we have to do, I agree with Dean, is making that APIs are not for like only nerds or tech people. I think we have to go towards simplification. We have to go towards integrating maybe design or UX functionalities to make the products more attractive to people who are not like telecom or even web specialists. We can maybe imagine that you can do very simple things easily with very little knowledge. We do it a little bit on our side, like the cut and paste development. And also I think that as there are so many platforms, we have to reach more audience. So I believe a lot that, okay, we have like on the bottom APIs, and then we'll have like apps solving like real problems, and maybe on top of these apps, some bits of API, but not like the whole big thing, because one customer or even one carrier is not going to use the whole set of capabilities, and APIs are sometimes confusing for that, so we have to work on that.
Yeah, can I have another go? After having leapt in with both hands, feet, and everything else in a normal fashion, having sat back and thought about it a little bit more, which is always a good idea, it's clear that those people who are going to be successful are those people who engage their brains and come up with a complete solution. It's quite clear that just technology alone is not going to be successful. I mean, in fact, I think we've all said that. You've got to have the complete mixture, including the commercial business piece. And it's great to look at certain players, like our friends over there from Nexmo, who seem to be doing okay, doing business at the back there, as always. Doing an excellent job. You've got to have the complete suite of skills and not forget anything, because if you miss one component, then you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, but I think that actually the case study that Lewis gave with Evanos, and you exposed a basic capability, and then they took it and then integrated it into their corporate experience. So there's a great example where it's a capability that's exposed, but it's actually in that B2B model. Yeah. It's the end customer, the consumer that's paying you basically your money, your revenue, that basically did the whole UX design piece.
Yeah, right. The design belongs a little bit to the customer when we are a platform. I mean, for the time being, maybe, we should, it's an interesting suggestion to work on that. But for instance, like just the fact of putting like this symbol that like we have on our mobiles to see if the connection is good, it's a simple and stupid UX thing. It's useful for the guy who is using the product and saying, I don't know what's WebRTC or APIs or whatever, I'm just a basic like user. Mm-hmm. keep the point.
So, I mean, again, it's open for any questions from the audience. If you have anything to ask the panel, now's a great time. Again, I'll come back to you again and again because people are shy. But let's move on. I think that one of the points that I think is a key question that will resolve itself over the next couple of years, in developed markets at least, slow markets, is whether a developer should work with a telco or direct. I mean, that's, I hold you up as an example, but I see a lot of developers struggling with this in terms of, are telcos valid channels to market? Or should we just use a capability from Nexmo and go direct ourselves?
The thing that telcos have is they still have is marketing muscle. The thing that telcos haven't worked out is how to use it beyond what their telco service is.
Yes.
Because, if you build something that works, people might even ring each other and tell them, listen, this is a good thing, it works, right? And then off you go. So I think this is the bit, this is actually, one of the things that bugs the daylights out of me is that the CMOs are never involved in the GSMA.
Yeah.
So, for example. So I've been hammering away at trying to get a CMO forum that actually works so that you can validate a go-to-market strategy and get everybody to confirm that's what they're going to do. That's one of the biggest problems we've got, is there's a big delta between the tech and the thing. But
I reckon in 5 years' time we're still going to be asking the same question. Because one of the things that generally, I mean, irrespective of whether it's a mobile or a Wi-Fi or a cable network, IP enables communication. And all the services, all the APIs we've been talking about today and for the last couple of years have all been laid over an IP network.
Yep.
WebRTC is going to be but one. SIP is another.
Yep.
And is a valid one, where, there will be a way you can engage working with the carrier will help. There will be ways in which working with a bank will help, even though you've got a communication service. One of the challenges, there's this kind of myth around, so it's not a myth, carriers do have a B2C, both a credit relationship and an identity relationship with all their subscribers. And that's an amazing, sometimes. And that's an amazing thing for a developer of any size to be able to say, well, that's a great channel. The thing that is, I think that the minor flaw in the argument to my right was that, accessing a carrier because they marketed that channel, when we're talking about a variety of services, some long tail, some enterprise focused, some SMB focused, it just doesn't happen well most of the time. And so being able to say, well, I want to work with Carrier X because Carrier X does TV ads, that's great for Carrier X, but not necessarily for the young developer that's done the one TAD hack in 2019.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that, but we still have the marketing muscle. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on that. And what I'm saying is it needs to happen, because I've launched a couple of OTT services, and it was all I could do to try and tell them to go OTT, actually offer it to everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the CMOs just couldn't buy spending a single cent on something that wasn't for their customers to retain them for that month or that quarter. But that's the bit that needs to change. Yeah. If they realize that, in fact, if they're going to embrace the whole ecosystem and realize that some stuff's just going to be available, like the Libon example, if that doesn't happen, we will die. So we've got to just embrace partnership in a way that hasn't even been considered yet. Right now, you're just getting solutions in a box from various very creative providers because it's the only way you can get anything across the line.
I think a lot of what you're saying is what we covered in the work stream this afternoon in 3, and it's absolutely true. And I think especially, there was a lot of talk of long tail, but small ideas have zero chance of getting traction in these large organizations. So if there was some facility where developers could go to develop those ideas and they didn't necessarily need to rely on these relationships that take forever to build, then there's a chance for it. I think the reality of it is any good idea, if it can be built without the carrier, it will be. Yeah. So the carriers either need to make it possible or they'll just miss the opportunities. Yeah, they're going to be built.
I think there's also a ton of business process issues here about having a way for the application developer have things like get paid. I mean, I know, dealing with large telcos, not naming any names, that sometimes actually getting cash from your bank account to my bank account is onerous task.
Without a big percentage getting chopped off for weird taxes.
And X months. But I had the same thing with a large US carrier. In the end, they've had to pay me via their event management company, because the event management company is actually able to pay by credit card to non-US businesses, whereas they're in-house. And yeah, I'd like to think I know my way around the industry reasonably well, but it's taken about a month to sort that out. And so I think there's a bunch of stuff which has nothing to do with the technology, nothing to do with the marketing. It's actually our service providers easy or feasible to do business with.
So just to answer that one, because it's a good point, one of the reasons Dialogue's idea mart works so well is that they've streamlined that to the nth degree. But just for the record, a small amount costs more to pay than the amount itself. That's the problem. And so there's various solutions out there to do that, but that's one of the... We've had to put processes in for what I'm doing now just to get over the fact that Group doesn't even know how to invoice anybody. They never had to do it.
The one amusing anecdote I want to add there is once when we were a startup and chronically short of cash, I do remember the day that the only thing which was standing between us and not making payroll was the fact that our first customer accidentally paid us twice.
So maybe moving on from that, because I think we've done that. WebRTC has popped up as a theme, and we've seen, again, from some of the telcos and vendors here, some great movement in terms of the commercialization of that technology. So, and I've been working, Ben, you've been working on it now since, well, quite a few years. So a question, and this comes from the pre-conference survey that we did, is why is WebRTC so complex compared to everything else within HTML5? Why are there so many confusing tools for HTML5? Sorry, for WebRTC. I thought, start with you, Ben.
I'd love to jump in on this. So, I've worked with voice for a long time, but I still consider myself as not really a telco person. My background doesn't really, not deeply telco. I think there are a couple things at play. I think one is that real-time communications, especially on the internet that we have, is just fundamentally hard. Yeah. Even once you get past the issue of codecs, and let's not even, I know it's a dirty word, excuse me for even saying it, but well, so even once you get past those things, getting a reliable stream or dealing with issues of NAT are not things that your average web developer wants to even have to consider. So if anything, I think there's a huge opportunity for carriers to provide that as a service, just the connectivity. WebRTC will do a great job of everything else, of the presentation layer, of so many other things. But running a turn server, no one wants to run a turn server, and no one wants to manage that infrastructure.
I quite like running turn server.
James, would you run my turn server, please?
No.
But I think that's part of it. It's just that real-time communications has some challenges that are unique that web developers don't typically deal with.
I think there's lots of technologies, specifically ones that have been either developed in an open source domain, or in this case standardized in a very open source domain through W3C, that are intrinsically bloody complex when they start out. Yeah. And there are a variety of there's a plethora of tools because lots of people hack on them and try and play with them. And after a while, there will be some winners that emerge there, whether it's open source libraries, whether it's a specific provider or something like that. That'll change. The other thing which is interesting about WebRTC, sorry James, is that it's all of a sudden we've gone from talking about the mobile operators to talking about the fixed wire, the broadband operators, quality of service issues. Yeah. So there's no one simple answer to that.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, one problem with being quite old is that if you don't get your idea in quickly, you forget it before it's your turn. So yeah, one of the reasons why WebRTC is so complicated is that a number of the big players in this infrastructure have got their own agendas. Yeah. So Microsoft has got their agenda, Apple have got their agenda, and WebRTC is not part of it. And until we end up with WebRTC working on all platforms, and we're still some way away from that. Great if you got Chrome, but if you're living in the damned world of Microsoft or you're totally Appleified, then you're kind of stuffed from a WebRTC point of view. And until we have a solution that works universally across all platforms, it's going to be an uphill challenge. Dean's champing at the bit.
Yeah, disagree strongly with that.
Well, go on, have a go then.
For 3, no, 4 reasons. I think it is for certain use cases that's a problem. For others, it isn't. And certainly what I've seen over the last 6 to 9 months is a move towards the cloud platform players in WebRTC, partly because they support, in some cases, their own plugins for IE if you need them. But more importantly, they offer the SDKs to put WebRTC type capabilities directly into mobile apps.
Yeah, I need to come back on that straight away. I mean, plugins, come on. I mean, who does plugins in the real world?
Lots of people.
Oracle, Adobe.
Normal people don't.
Well, actually, I keep trying to persuade Oracle to like the next version of Java should smuggle in WebRTC to everything along with it. But that's a really good idea. I think I put it on my blog about a year and a half ago. Nothing's happened, but yeah, I'd like to see it's a good idea. But no, it is viable on a number of ways and a number of platforms. So for companies that are using whether it's the top boxes of this world or the Temesises, there's a bunch of things which are out there, or which are ways of getting real-time voice or video data into applications and websites. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not as easy as initially thought, where everyone was just like, have a small piece of JavaScript and you're done. And that's why there is this ecosystem of sort of middle players that are emerging. And there's a number of reasons for that. Partly it's the platform support, but it's also because you start running into issues, particularly if you're trying to do multi-party video over networks of different speeds and qualities. You can't do all of them peer-to-peer. So if I try to do 6-way video peer-to-peer off a phone while I'm roaming, it's not going to happen. And you need to have some sort of hub or control point mixing, equivalent of an MCU in video conferencing, to handle that intelligently. And I think then if you add in sort of codecs and potential need for transcoding amongst other platforms, there certainly is a need for some sort of infrastructure play for certain use cases. But I think the thing here is WebRTC has hundreds, potentially, use cases. Mm-hmm. Some of them are happening faster than others, so there's quite a lot of use internally within call centers, which is starting to happen. There are heavily integrated solutions like the video bit of Amazon's Mayday. Then you've got things like, Snapchat went and bought AdLive, which has, if you have Snapchat on your phone, the video, two-way video bit is WebRTC powered, because they went and acquired a company that did it. And it's now propping up in things like unified comms platforms. What used to be Siemens, now Unify, launched one a couple of weeks ago. And service providers, there's about 10 or so live telco WebRTC services of different types. And where they're slow to emerge is where they involve interaction and interconnection with the PSTN or SMS or anything else. It's the standalone ones which tend to be out there first.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to quickly highlight one potential danger, and that is, I think that if telcos over-telcoize the WebRTC, there's a real potential for both overcomplicating it and making it. Absolutely right. Yeah, it needs to continue to be a web first.
Correct. I'd say it needs to be dispersed. So, I advise quite a lot of telcos on WebRTC strategy, and one of the things I always say is that they should be dispersing WebRTC into different parts of the business. And so the enterprise guys should go and do stuff, the consumer web guys, the core network guys, the digital services guys, even the IPTV and cable guys should be thinking about how WebRTC can add value to their proposition. That may or may not have commonality in terms of the capabilities and platforms, or to be honest, it may be a case of throw everything at the wall now and see what happens in a year's time. The way to think about it is HTML5. Telcos don't have an HTML strategy or an electricity strategy.
Well said.
Okay. The question was exactly?
Why is WebRTC so complex compared to everything else in HTML5?
Okay. I'm being around on the WebRTC scene for like 2 years. I think the answer is today it's much simpler than it used to be. That's the first thing. And I agree, there are a lot of platforms now from last year to this year. And I think it's also complicated, but because it does a lot of new things that nobody was able to do. So you cannot do like complicated things easily. But in fact, what we see on our platform when they take the WebRTC SDK is that it's very easy to integrate and they have no problem. Then you can have, but you have the tools for all these net traversals, the turn servers, and it's very low cost. I mean, if you take like, how are they called? Wemo now? Site call. You can build like conferencing services with a TalkBox or Wemo, site call platform for nothing. Yeah. I mean, it's very, 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 very low cost. Yeah. And for the carriers, I don't know. I think that if Snapchat acquired AdLife and it's like an app, a communication app, probably some of the platforms probably will go into carriers one day.
I mean, Telefonica bought TalkBox, and to be fair, I think we need to. There's some credit shown there for that was 2 years ago, and it's still pretty independent. It's still one of the leading platform players, and well, at the very least, hasn't been screwed up, and it certainly looks as if it's actually gone, fairly much in the right direction.
I think there's another little conversation, which is the difference between retail and enterprise. So anything that is aimed at retail is going to take longer, because there's so many onerous things around putting something out. But enterprise can play, and if it's app-based, then you're fine. So,
that's a good point.
I mean, the enterprise units of carriers have dealt with external parties for years, and voice over IP, they resell Cisco and Avaya and Microsoft Link and 1,000,001 audio conferencing and video conferencing and WebEx and everything else. So, working with WebRTC is an extension of that model.
Cool.